So let's have the revision of Indian economic on the eve of independence. Under that, we have to study two things. That is, before independence, what was the condition, and after independence, why our economy underdeveloped and stagnant. With that, we are going to cover these topics, that the low level of Indian economic development, agriculture sector, industrial sector, foreign trade, demographic condition, occupational structure, and infrastructure. If we see, the primary objective of the British control was on colonial rule, that India should be a supplier of raw material and a consumer of finished goods. Due to that, it happened due to with the introduction of colonialism. Colonialism refers to a system of political and social relation between two countries, which is one is ruler and other is its colony. With that, India was colonized for 200 years. Before British rule, India was well known, a prosperous country in the handicraft and textile and other material. We had a quality of life, we had a high standard of craftsmanship in our country. But after independence, the condition was totally opposite. Our total growth rate fall. It was less than 2%, and the per capita income was only 0.5% because of the colonial rule and their policy of protection and promotion of economic interest in their home country. Our well-known economists like Dadabhai Naroji, V.K. Rao, R.C. Desai, they all attempted sincerely to determine the national income and per capita income. First effect was in agriculture sector. That time, India, most of the people, around 85% people, were dependent on agriculture sector. They were actually living in villages, and that's why they had a total main source of earning was only agriculture sector, and because of no interest by the British, agriculture sector has a stagnation and deterioration. See, the reason for stagnation was land settlement system. This is also jamindari system, it comes under that. And in this, the settlement main interests were given to jamindars to collect the rent and other things as a lagan. Second reason was commercialization of agriculture and low level of technology, lack of irrigation facilities, negligible use of fertilizers. Commercialization of agriculture means when Britishers always were in need of raw material like cotton, indigo, and all, they offer high prices. The Indian peasant were attracted towards these prices, so started producing cash crops instead of food crops. So there was fall in production of food crops, which was responsible for the famine in India during that days. And growing cash crops instead of food crops is called commercialization of agriculture. If we talk about industrial sector, India was not able to develop properly in this field. Our handicraft industry was declined, commercial problem arise, and this sector was needed modernization and increased investment. The primary motive of deindustrialization was to reduce India the status of exporter than the importer. India became only exporter of raw material, and Indian market was turned as a market for Britishers to sell their finished product. The rate of growth Indian sector was very low, and colonial government also followed discriminatory tariff policy, which allowed free export of raw material from India and free import of final good from British industry. This declined handicraft industry badly, so there was unemployment and there was very fall in supply of local made goods like which was scarcely available in the Indian market. The status of foreign trade was a restrictive policy which was followed by colonial government. It also adversely affected the structure, composition and volume of India's foreign trade. If we see the composition of India's foreign trade, India became an exporter of primary product like raw silk, cotton, wood and all, an importer of finished consumer good like cotton, silk and capital goods. The total volume of export was more than the import, and more than half of the India's foreign trade was only with the Britain, and rest was allowed with the few countries like China, Ceylon, Persia. Opening of Suez Canal, which was opened in 1869, caused reduction in the cost of transportation, and it made easily access to Indian market. In other words, Indian market was exploited easily. This late drain of India's wealth. This term is popularly known as economic drain. India's foreign trade was generated huge export, but due to the misuse of payment, misuse of surplus, this surplus was misused by making payment of the expenses incurred by the office setup and war expenses and import of visible item. This laid economic drain. Status of demographic condition. Status of demographic conditions tells that India's economy and the population was also backward, and its population first census was done in 1881. Before 1921, India's was in first stage of demographic transition. The second stage was after 1921. So neither the total population nor the rate of population growth were very high. But after 21, it was started increasing. So that's why it's known as year of great divide. Demographic condition was like overall literacy rate was less than 16%. Out of that, female literacy was only 7%. Mortality rate was very high. Infant mortality rate was 218 per thousand. And the life expectancy was also very low. That was only 32%. Presently, we have 68 to 69. Poverty was extremely high. Poor health facility were available, and other waterborne and airborne diseases were attempting to India's population. The status of occupational structure says India's occupation was divided into three parts: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Most of 70 to 75% people were participating in agriculture sector. Manufacturing sector were around 10% and service sector 15 to 20%. There was regional disparity and there was decline in dependence of workforce, especially in Madras presidency and the Bengal and Maharashtra presidency. There was increase in the workforce in agriculture in the state like Orissa, Rajasthan and Punjab. Condition of infrastructure was also not so good, but some of the things British have done positively right. Under colonial rule, basic infrastructure like road, railway, ports, water transport, telegraph, post, these were developed. But these development was not for the Indian benefit, it was only for the benefit of British government. The roads were built to mobilize the army and the raw material to the countryside. Railway also helped to commercialize the Indian agriculture, which adversely affected our economy. The introduction of expensive system like electric telegraph of India, similarly, and other system also were not beneficial for Indian economy. Worst effect was of railway. Railway introduced in 1850 and it was one of the most important contribution by the Britishers. It enabled people to undertake long distance travels, also break the geographical and cultural barriers. It helped the nation to integrate. It also helped the commercialization of agriculture and also self-sufficiency in village economy, but it was adversely affected. The volume of India's export also undoubtedly expanded due to the railway introduction. It also provided employment opportunity to the people. Overall, it has positive and negative impact on Indian economy. So in conclusion, positive and negative contribution of British, if we see, positive contribution was introduction of railway, modern system of communication, banking system was introduced by the British in the first, we all know RBI established in 1935, and they developed irrigation works, they developed political unification of the country. But the negative side, per capita income became very low. Large scale of unemployment and poverty was there. Industrial sector was crying. There were no modernization, no any kind of investment. Agriculture sector were totally stagnant and backward. All production was extremely low. There was mass illiteracy. So overall, if the conclusion, if we see the India's economy before colonization and after colonization adversely affected. So in the next chapter, we will study how we overcome with this situation. Till then, the conclusion we used to do that we have to focus on what was the condition of stagnation of agriculture and the other sectors.